So the week after the autumn statement, the investment conference on Monday, but actually ended up being an unusual week for Rishi Sunak because he wasn't talking about the things we thought he'd want to talk about. He's ended up not just in a row with his backbenchers about migration and his Rwanda deal with the new Home Secretary James Cleverly, but also this massive diplomatic row with the Greeks over the cancelling of the Greek Prime Minister's meeting with Rishi Sunak on Monday because the Greek Prime Minister had said the wrong things the day before on the Koonsberg programme.
Well, the first thing is, I should say, as chair of the British Museum, that whether the British Prime Minister meets the Greek Prime Minister or not is not directly relevant to what we're trying to do. So the British Museum was set up 250 odd years ago to be independent of the government. The trustee body is independent. And when we act within the law, we do so independently. And we're not seeking a change of the law. And in this vexed issue of what should happen to the Elgin marbles, the sculptures that went around the Acropolis in ancient Greece, I've been exploring with the Greek government on behalf of the museum whether some kind of deal can be reached whereby they spend part of their time in Athens and part of their time in London, and we have Greek treasures coming our way in return. And that is, I think, something worth exploring. And we can go on doing it whether or not Rishi Sunak meets the Greek Prime Minister or not. In fact, if anything, things have been rather clarified by this week. We obviously know we're not going to get any particular support from the Conservative government, but in fact the Labour leader, Keir Starmer, also said that whilst he supported the British Museum's efforts, he wasn't planning to change the law. And if you don't change the law, then there's no prospect anytime soon of them just being restituted to Greece, returned with nothing, just simply handed back, which anyway wouldn't be a decision for the museum. And so, to my mind, as chair of the British Museum, it's all the more reason to press on with our efforts to try and reach an agreement with the Greeks. Hard to do, lots of history there, but I think worth trying.
And do you think you can succeed?
Well, I would say it's 50-50. I mean, there's a reason why for 200 years people have been arguing about this. They were controversial when they arrived in this country. In the early 19th century, Lord Byron, the famous poet, argued against them coming here, but Parliament decided to buy them off Lord Elgin, who was the ambassador, the British ambassador to the Ottoman Empire at the time. And so there's a reason why no one's found a solution, but I'm working hard with the Greek government to try and find that solution. Who knows? I think if there's goodwill, we'll get a breakthrough. But, as I say, we don't want the law changed, and so we don't need either the Conservative Prime Minister or the Labour leader to weigh in, particularly.
I mean, it seems to me that over past decades, there was a problem for the British Museum or for the British government because valuable artefacts in the past, there would have been a worry whether or them being in Greece for some or all of the time would have led to them being damaged or undermined or something could go wrong. Really hard to say that now about the modern Greek state. I was actually in Athens just a few weeks ago meeting antiquarians. I think that's the right word.
Or archaeologists.
Or, God knows.
All begins with A, in Athens.
They seemed pretty good and they knew what they were doing. And you don't think to yourself, these artefacts are going to be damaged by being held in Greece for some or all of the time. But standing back from the detail of what you're kind of negotiating, quite why Rishi Sunak chose to pick this fight in this way, it's kind of baffling. I mean, I think back to the time when I was in the Treasury with Gordon Brown, or seeing him in Number 10. I mean, lots of times he would have been worrying about a big domestic issue and or a big problem he had to face. And somebody would have said, you've got to have a meeting with a visiting Prime Minister or Finance Minister. And they might have said, and they've also said something slightly inconvenient in their press conference the day before, and Gordon would have said, cancel it. And you always needed somebody in the room to say, don't be an effing idiot. I mean, we're not going to cancel our meeting with that Prime Minister because it's not convenient for you or they said something a bit inconvenient. And Gordon would always shrug his shoulders and say, fine, let's get it done. Why did nobody say to Rishi Sunak at that moment, it's a crazy thing to do to pick this fight, unless, I guess, were they thinking that this was in their political interest to have this fight?
Well, often in life, in politics, people say it's a conspiracy when basically it's a cock-up. And, I think if you look at this, it's not clear to me why number 10 were not expecting the Greek Prime Minister to raise the Elgin marbles. Mitsotakis, the Greek Prime Minister, has raised the Elgin marbles every time he's come to Britain, and he's then gone on to have meetings with Prime Ministers like Boris Johnson. In fact, if anything, Mitsotakis, Harvard-educated, quite Anglophile, is quite similar to Rishi Sunak, curiously. They probably wouldn't acknowledge it today, but they're quite sort of similar international elite individuals.
He's very good on TV.
Very, very fluent.
We've had him on
TV.
Good Morning Britain. He's an excellent person to talk to.
Right. So I don't know what they were expecting. And I certainly had no idea he was going to cancel the meeting with the Greek Prime Minister. It came completely as news to me. And everyone then kind of tried to get, everyone was sort of asking for my reaction, which I said, wait for our podcast.
Good.
But I did try and find out what was going on, and I heard various theories from my friends. So some people were telling me it's a cunning plan to distract attention from the row in the Conservative Party around migration, and it's the dead cat strategy, to use a phrase that's sometimes deployed in politics, which is you turn people's attention away from a row you're having by literally putting a kind of, more metaphorically rather, putting a dead cat on the table. So that's one theory. Another theory is that he's appealing to the red wall. These are the kind of former Labour seats in the north. Although the idea that red wall voters in Hartlepool or Sedgefield or wherever are like really concerned about what happens to Pericles' ancient statues, and I suspect they're rather more concerned, as someone put it earlier today, about whether they can get a GP appointment before Christmas. So I'm not sure it's a brilliant red wall strategy.
I mean, the polls say the large majority of people either don't care or say return them. I mean, the actual people who really care about keeping them is a small minority. There may be quite a few of them on the Conservative backbenchers, but there are not very many voters who think like that.
Yeah. So then you ask the question: is it just petulance? Is it just having a bit of a hissy fit? And I think if that's the reason, it's not because Mitsotakis was going to raise the Elgin marbles. It's because he had met Keir Starmer the day before. And I think in number 10, I remember being there in 96, 97, you can sort of feel the power start to drain from the building when you're getting close to an election which people think you're not going to win. And I thought, what Rishi Sunak did was open the door, this was definitely not what he should have done, to a pretty devastating line of attack from Keir Starmer at Prime Minister's Questions this week. Rishi Sunak, I'll say it again and again and again. I think he's a good Prime Minister. I go to bed at night and wake up in the morning pleased that someone is sensible and serious doing that job in number 10 after several years when that's not been the case. And he should be doubling down on being the serious person, and who, of course, meets another European leader when they're in town to discuss things like Ukraine or the energy crisis or migration, all of which Greece is relevant to. It just shows, again, that they're not focused on delivering a coherent strategy week after week after week, which is the Conservatives' only chance of getting back into this political fight.